Faith and Science, Primeval, Genesis 1:1a Aleph, or else Faith Against Science, Posteval Messianism, Part 2. Quote, there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. Kierkegaard. But just in case there is still doubt in anybody's mind about this matter of the illegitimacy of Messianism, let's now move on to dotting the I's and crossing the T's with Deuteronomy 30:11-15. Since this is elaborate, I'll first quote the original text and then later on take notes on the body of the text itself for the sake of clarity. In all this, I will be citing the sources since it's at the root of the problem. The following quoted from Sepharia on the internet as basic reference due to convenience of access. However, others from Reformed, Conservative, and Orthodox sources will be cited as well to demonstrate the extent of this faith surmise phenomenon. As it stands, it blends with the prevalent narrative of alien Messianism. Deuteronomy 29:11 sets the stage for Deuteronomy 30:11, and we now proceed to quote, for you to pass into the covenant of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your GD, and into his oath, which Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, your GD, is concluding with you this day. Some sources, like Etz Chaim, conservatives, translate this key word as cautions, as in uvalato and his sanctions. This, or else translated as, quote, oath, but commented in the context as referring to the previously mentioned curses, as friendly reminder. Nothing could be further from the spirit of the text. An Orthodox source, Hertz, mentions uvalato and his oath, and refers to its first uses in Genesis 26:28, and from there to Genesis 21:22. The sense in Genesis 26:28 of the meaning of olah, oath, is clearly a treaty, an alliance of sorts for mutual benefit, not sanctions, in detriment to humanity. This is clearly patent from the above quote of its sense in context from Genesis. Once this is firmly established, we can move on to the fine print of the key version question of Deuteronomy 30:11-15 as follows in visual presentation. In Deuteronomy 30:11-15, it's talking about the commandments and then moves on to focus on, quote, the commandment as a takeaway of the Torah and enunciates it in usual code. This we now quote for convenience with comments in parentheses. Quote, surely this commandment, parentheses, my comment, the takeaway of Torah as commandment of commandments, quote, which I enjoin upon you this day, it's not wonderful, parentheses, is not messianic coming nor heathen mystery, but in Genesis 1:1a Aleph, quote, is not from you, it's from you, quote, as creations, creative creatures, quote, and not distance it is, parentheses, paradise us here and now, and not alien coming Messiah nor in heaven, Deuteronomy 30:11. With this behind us, the text further clarifies that it is not in the heavens, nor far out in space, nor in time either. It is in us from creation as creative creatures in our hearts and head and hands. This clearly defines paradise on earth, or chaos if we reject it, which is the case today. However, given its importance, allow me to go over it again in reading of the Torah text itself. The problem refers to the sequence of cantillation marks, quote, merkah, pashta, katon, in Deuteronomy 30:11 latter part. As with the text, it is, quote, not too baffling for you. The Sepharia translation using, quote, for you coincide with those of most authors like Etz Chaim and Reform. Those of Forno, Rashi, and Monk use, quote, from you. However, conserving the same meaning as in, quote, it's not hidden from you. My claim is that a merkah as subject mark followed by a pashta mark means signaling a concluding statement. Furthermore, literally, it says, mimecha, from you, and not lecha, for you. My literal translation has, quote, it's not wonderful, it's from you. The key words are hi mimecha, It's from you, meaning that it's found in the Torah itself if you care to look for it and not in heaven. This is further reinforced by saying, quote, nor is it beyond reach, meaning it's not in the future either, which would require a Messiah Mashiach to bring it back to us in the present past. My point is that, quote, the commandment has always been found in Genesis 1:1a Aleph on earth, as we've been saying all along, and doesn't require prophets nor the coming of the Messiah to figure it out, since it's simply the acronym paradise and not something wonderful out of this world of mass space-time. The problem I'm facing is that peers find this either too simple to be true or else too complex to understand. De todos modos, Juan te llamas, to put it bluntly. Without the takeaway, the narrative of the Torah sounds antiquated, proper to a backward society of cows agriculture, cloaked in strange language. It was written out of time, for all time, but without the respective code, it's half sense and half nonsense. The concept of quintessential of Greek invoicing is along the same lines as Hebrew takeaway. But you can no more prove there's a creator than disprove it, regardless of creation or eternal universe. It's a matter of whole faith and not of triad science. We live in a broken world, but not out of punishment, rather out of self-inflicted wounds. The problem is understanding that the simple, what doesn't have parts, is whole, yet unfolds onto a triad of parts. Triad is the key word. The reason is clearly because the simple as whole is one, faith being as secret as. Furthermore, the one whole unfolds as triad parts, science, becoming, as discover, remit, plane, PRD. But how can we be sure that we're still on the right track and haven't lost our way? Only by restarting from the very beginning at every pause at Genesis 1:1a Aleph. Like clicking save while writing text in a document so as to avoid losing information. All proportions kept is like learning from the transmutation of the caterpillar via cocoon to butterfly. It's still plain triad us as one all the time. It's up to us to meet the challenge and become ourselves, the coming of the Messiah Mashiach as becoming beings. That is, from becoming triad of parts PRD, turn into being one whole S as paradise in Genesis 1:1a Aleph. I ask, and of what use is knowing, quote, the commandment, the takeaway of the Torah? Where does it say so? Doing the math confirms that all 613 commandments reduce to one commandment, as in 6 plus 1 plus 3 equals 10, equals 1 plus 0 equals 1. It says above in Deuteronomy 29:28 to apply what has been revealed to us. All that's in the word of the Torah teaching. You cannot understand the 613 commandments out of context of the one commandment. The revealed refers to both, on the one hand, the, quote, source Torah of our very own quote, being in the creation story in Genesis 1:26-28, and on the other hand, of the, quote, field Torah as reminder of whom we, quote, become, as above in Deuteronomy 29:28. As creative creatures of creation by the Creator, we are keychain Torahs. This lesson is encapsulated in the following verses. Deuteronomy 30:15-16 says, quote, choose dialogue with life and dialogue with the good for panacea. And by contrast, Deuteronomy 30:17-20 says, but if you choose death and evil, then you get chaos. Precisely what we have today. These two previous slides touch what we're referring to in this article, that instead of choosing life and good, we have somehow ended choosing death and bad by the look of things in our broken world. All this is courtesy of miscue from our dear sages. To give them self-importance, the sages called their work, quote, oral Torah, but their work is just legal liturgical concerns, applications of tradition based on secondary laws, the usual judicial structure of civilization out of their understanding of culture. To these I would ask, Ayeka, where are you? This is what I ask Posteval rabbinism, which endorses Messianism. Yes, where are you? The takeaway was overlooked, and that was at first long ago. But why do you still keep overlooking it after 3,000 years and counting? Because of idolatry, of messianism, rabbinism, and dualism blindsiding us. Until we kick the door down and push it out of the way, it will continue blocking access to paradise, messianic times, of our own merit. At first, cultural thought wasn't that developed, granted, but ever since dualism of Greek antiquity went global, it's thanks to messianism or rabbinism that's mostly to blame. Scholarship in academia is accountable for the rest of the charge. Translation as interpretation is as rewriting the text. They get away with murder under the cover of the other Torah, the quote, oral Torah, as if this were the case. It's Kabbalah reception of the constitutionary legal oral tradition, just as medieval Kabbalah reception is of the philosophical oral tradition. But this tradition isn't called, quote, underlying Torah. You simply cannot be calling yourself what you're not. Words do matter. Oral Torah, oral law, yes, but not oral Torah, as oral tradition. It is misleading with underlying unscrupulous intentions. Someone needs to be held accountable for the breakdown of the world, in spite of counting with the insight gained by the revelation of the Torah at Sinai. It's none other than those in charge all this time of rabbinism at the Beit Knesset and of scholarship in secular academia. We should have been working creatively hard at making Messianic times here and now by applying primeval faith science all this time instead of being entertained with post-evil faith against science of the so-called quote oral Torah tradition of Messianism. But how? By simply applying paradise as panacea to our issues. The quote issues is the issue. Verse 30:11 Deuteronomy clearly states that the panacea is not in heaven. No Messiah needs to bring it since it's already on earth. Neither mystic heathens nor scholars and doctors of the law are required as intermediaries, since it's imprinted in our hearts since creation. The rationalization given by the interpretations is that this passage is referring to the curses and repentance, not to the big picture view of things of the Torah takeaway. The position of rabbinism isn't supported in the text. It's just a product of collective oversight, wittingly or unwittingly, but very harmful to us all on the long run, not without having its own benefits. Many benefits. Rabbinism has an interest in promoting its own interests. While rabbinism is 99% right, yet is the 1% wrong that's the cause of its downfall. No school of thought lasts forever, let's face it. Let's open in each chapter in faith and science as primeval faith science. But we must conclude this discourse, otherwise it's pointless. It's a package deal. Nothing changes unless everything changes. Things come in packets. In this case, idolatry, messianism, rabbinism, and dualism. We are witnessing the end of rabbinism and the beginning of primeval faith and science of the engineering of reconstitution, a keychain version of recreation. The problem is that 99% of past glories and the 1% bad is now in the present blocking the way forward. We cannot turn the page of history unless we get rid of the whole package. The idolatry of past stone figurines is gross compared to today's ideological software, but essentially is no different than the mule is to the tractor. My ideas aren't catching on, besides my poor social skills, because they're challenging long and dearly held beliefs which are wrong that have been passed on in tradition without second thought out of respect for authority. Respect, yes, but not veneration. Trust, but verify. We'll leave Maimonides till last as dessert to end on a good note as is customary. His 13 articles of faith include Messianic times, but they're different things, Messianic times and Messianism. We are bringing the Messianic times ourselves by Paradise in Genesis 1:1a Aleph applications to real life as panacea. Well, that's all, people, for today. Yours truly, Rick, your Anusi Charro, Mr. T, and GD Bless, Austin, Texas, capital of the world.